like I'm starting every podcast with, hey, folks, it's been a heck of a year, right? What a weird year, but I don't know what else to say about it. It's been such a weird year. The coronavirus, the weirdest part, and obviously the politics of the moment are very tumultuous, but let's focus on coronavirus for a minute. Our nation is in the process, and obviously it's different stages in different parts of the country. For good reason, the virus hit different areas harder than it did others, probably for things having a lot to do with the way we live, right? Living in New York is a much different thing than New York City is a much different thing than living in, say, Beulah, North Dakota, right? Those are two very different places. Anyway, we're all trying to make sense of how do we get back to work, right? Because that's what we want. We want to get back to work. We want to go to our jobs. We want to be able to enjoy the businesses in our community and the amenities in our community. We want to be able to live our lives without these restrictions anymore. And so that's what we're doing is we're trying to reopen in a way that doesn't put us at risk, that doesn't foment some new outbreak of the virus and move us backwards. But as that happens, the business community has some tough things to grapple with. For one thing, which business, and I couldn't even imagine, which business, and I don't think, listen, the business community, responsible people for the most part, bad apples in any bunch, but for the most part, the business community, good people that they want to reopen their business, they want to employ their employees, they want to serve the public, of course they want to, make some profit as well, and I'm glad I'm not in their shoes, where I have to make a decision like, how do I open my business? How do I bring my employees back to work? But I don't want to put anybody at risk. It's a tough thing. Now, the North Dakota Chamber of Commerce, they're part of Arik Spencer from the Chamber's on with me now. And Arik, I imagine this is a national push that you guys are looking for to put in place some liability protections for businesses from Congress to sort of grease the skids to reopening. Is that right? Am I describing this right accurately?
Hi, Rob. Yeah, you have it right on. And when we first learned about, or this issue came up on our radar, we were hearing reports in other states where businesses were trying to reopen. They were following CDC guidelines or their state health department guidelines. And there was advertisements saying, have you been to a business and do you have COVID? Give us a call from trial attorneys. Or did you catch COVID? Think your employer is responsible? Give us a call. And so it got us thinking in chambers across the country, thinking that there needs to be some liability protection for business owners or companies who are doing the right thing and are taking CDC guidelines seriously. They're taking, for example, the North Dakota Smart Restart guidelines seriously. And they're implementing changes. And so for those who are trying to keep their employees and customers safe, trying to protect jobs, let's provide some liability protection to those folks. And, if people are bad actors and they're not taking any steps, they can still be held accountable. But, let's try to help businesses get back going, get our economy going, and get people back in the jobs that they had before.
Right. We've talked so much about what the government, we all got those checks from the government. The government's made all sorts of programs and safety nets available for people impacted by the virus, which frankly was pretty much all of us. Even if you didn't get the virus, you were probably impacted. You were working from home. Maybe you lost your job. You were impacted economically. It touched all of us. So, but one of the best ways to help people is just keep them in their jobs. Right? If they already had a job and they were already self-sufficient and they were making money and they had, insurance benefits and other things through their employer, keeping them in that job is the best way to help them. So getting businesses back to work is just the best way to help the economy recover, right? Help everybody recover. Like businesses reopen. It's not just about me being able to go out and buy things. It's so that, hey, my job is back. Right, my business is real. My job is back. I can go back into the office. I'm getting a paycheck again. I'm getting benefits again. That's key to helping the country recover. Now, how exactly would this work? Like as a liability protection? Give us the nuts and bolts. How would you envision this working to protect businesses?
It really depends on how the law would be written.
Sure.
But essentially, anyone can sue anyone at any time for anything. What
Sure.
we're hoping is that if an employer can document that they have followed these guidelines, whether they're state or federal or both, those lawsuits can be dismissed. If they can't do that, then those things would go forward. But lawsuits could be for a variety of reasons. It could be it can stem from people getting COVID. There are manufacturers who have stopped making what they usually do and are making PPE or hand sanitizer. Can they be sued? For trying to be a good Samaritan, essentially? Could a public company be sued because the stock price took a dive from COVID? So there's a variety of things that I think lawmakers are looking at that will be considered. What some states are doing, they're implementing their own state-level liability protection. If Congress can't do that, I know that we're going to be looking at pushing that here in North Dakota down the road when the legislature either convenes in a special session or they come back next January. But it's a big deal to give business owners certainty in terms of what the legal landscape looks like, because when this first started, we weren't sure if this was the beginning of a zombie apocalypse movie, and over time it's changed, and it's different in different communities, and so the guidelines have changed. They've been evolving as time has gone on, and so it's put business owners in a real tough spot to keep up to date on all these things, keep investing in safety equipment, PPE, touchless things. So it's been a challenge on a lot of businesses, especially those consumer-facing businesses, like retail, restaurants, bars, hotels, but even manufacturers. I mean, they're having their own challenges. So it's kind of all across the board.
It's interesting that you brought up the Good Samaritan angle. I hadn't even thought of that. I was mostly thinking of this issue in the context of, hey, I'm a mom and pop convenience store or something, and I want to reopen, but after I reopen, maybe 4 or 5 people say, oh, I got infected and it happened at this store, and now we're going to sue you and it's your fault. That's the context I was thinking of. And I think that's not an unimportant context to think about. But the Good Samaritan thing, because we already have laws on the books that protect Good Samaritans. I know many states, including North Dakota, has laws that say, for instance, we just had a debate at the legislature saying that if you were taking drugs and you get a certain level of immunity, if you bring an overdose to law enforcement or call an ambulance or bring them to the hospital, you get a certain amount of leeway that's because what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, listen, we're going to remove liability from you if you're trying to do the right thing. Right?
Exactly.
Or the Good Samaritan law is if you come up across a car accident, right? And somebody's like laying in the car and the car's on fire and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to drag this person out. But in the course of doing so, maybe you aggravate their injuries in some way. And then, can they sue you for that? Because you're not a doctor, you're not a medical professional. You turned up on the scene and you were trying your best to help. We have some laws in place to protect people like that from liability. Essentially what you're saying is, in this extremely unusual moment in American history, we need to look at that for businesses right now that are trying to do the right thing, that are acting in good faith. We need to get them some protections so that people can't come back after the fact and say, oh, you're the reason I got COVID, or you're the reason that something bad happened to me because you reopened too quickly. If you're acting in good faith, you're going to have some protections. That's what you want.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. You summed it up, really well. And this isn't a complicated issue. I mean, we think it's a common sense issue that, this is a very narrow area of liability protection during the pandemic. Hopefully in a year when, if there is
hopefully it won't even be a factor in a year.
Yeah, hopefully this won't be an issue, but it does concern us because we have been seeing those ads, even here in North Dakota, do you have COVID? You think your employer gave it to you? Let us know. And that's concerning.
You've seen those ads.
We don't want to kick people when they're down.
You've seen those ads in North Dakota?
Yeah, we've heard from members in the Fargo area that they've heard those ads.
Wow. Well, that's pretty remarkable. And again, I don't want. Obviously, our court system exists for a reason. If people have grievances, that's the proper venue to settle them. And I don't necessarily begrudge somebody who thinks they got a case from filing, but let me just play, because I support this. I think this is the right thing to do. Obviously, the devil's in the details, and we're going to have a debate about this bill. Well, let me get this question out of the way first. Would this be retroactive? I mean, because obviously the reopening is happening now. I mean, businesses are opening now. Would this be retroactive?
I think it would have to be retroactive, but the companies, to qualify for it, you would have to be able to demonstrate that you've taken steps to follow these protocols. But I would think it'd have to be retroactive.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate for a moment and say, all you're doing is you're going to make it hard for people who were really harmed, for businesses that opened too early, for businesses that put their employees at risk, that all you're going to do is just protect them from consequences for their actions. Because that's sort of, when I've seen this debated, that's been some of the response I've seen from people is, oh, of course, we're going to protect big business from, they hurt people, they acted recklessly, and now we're going to protect them. What's your response to people who are saying that?
If they have a legitimate concern that their company or their business or their employer didn't follow CDC guidelines and acted, recklessly, that's a different story. And as you said, anyone has the right to bring a genuine grievance forward. But people shouldn't think about this as just big business. I mean, think about your corner gas station, the place you get coffee, the retail store you like to go.
Your favorite microbrewery.
These are your friends.
Your favorite microbrewery, which is small. Usually those are pretty small businesses. They're not big chains. Usually those are small local people. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And also, like you said, the businesses that said, hey, we're going to stop making the product that we normally make, and we're going to try in this state of emergency to make a product that we're not used to making. If we made a mistake and maybe they were not 100% effective as they could because, hey, we don't normally make masks, can they get sued for that? I think that's a protection we need to put in place.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I mean, you even think about distillers. There's distillers right here in North Dakota that stopped distilling alcohol and they started making hand sanitizer because it's not too different of a process. And I think they should be commended for trying to fill a void when hand sanitizer was scarce, instead of saying now we're gonna put the screws to you and make you pay for it.
I think of future. I mean, gosh, I hope we never go through this again. But the world is an unpredictable place, and so I'm thinking in the future, whether it's something like a virus or maybe even just a natural disaster, and you've got businesses that are saying, "Hey, we're gonna, we're gonna kick into gear and we're gonna try to do something good here." Those businesses might not make, if they get burned in this situation, they might not make that decision in the future. The business community, they might decide, it's just too much risk here, and as much as we want to help, we're not helping anybody by tanking our business by creating this huge liability for ourselves.
No, you're exactly right. And another angle on this is that, and we've already talked about it, but as people are trying to get out of this economic hump that we've had, let's not inhibit them anymore. Let's get people back to work. Let's get people moving again. I mean, our economy, our whole country is based upon businesses hiring people to work, people working. That creates wealth, that creates tax revenue, that funds, the North Dakota way of life. And we think this just makes sense to help foster that.
Who would have the burden of proof? Like let's say that the policy that you're supporting passes, and somebody says, hey, and let's say I have a burger joint, and people say, oh, Rob didn't follow the guidelines or whatever. Would the law put the burden on me? Like, I would have to show, oh, no, I followed all the guidelines? Or do they have to prove that I didn't follow the guidelines?
That's an interesting question, and I think it could go a couple different ways. But, ultimately, you're innocent till proven guilty. If someone makes an accusation that you aren't following guidelines, I think it's up to them to prove it, and also up to the company to, make that defense and say, hey, here's the steps we did make. Here's when we made them. Here was the guidelines at that time. Here's how we have continued to follow state and federal guidance as this has evolved.
That wouldn't be an easy situation. I mean, it would be. I mean, listen. I think every employer has dealt with an employee who was unhappy for one reason or another, and could say, "Oh, sure, yeah, he sent out the memos and everything, but in practice, he didn't have us wearing masks, or he didn't have us follow whatever the guideline is. He didn't have us following it in practice." So whatever his memos are. I mean, how do you I'm trying to think of, as a business owner, how you document that. I mean, you could save your memos. I guess maybe if you have like security footage inside your store. So I mean, I don't know, but that would be hard, I would think. I mean, that's still a tough thing. If you're in the seat of having to document and prove your innocence, that would be a tough thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenging thing, and the way it will unfold is, we're not certain yet. There's, sample legislation from a variety of states we're evaluating.
Yeah.
But hopefully, I guess our hope is that Congress does this on a nationwide basis, and does it in a common sense way that makes sense. It's going to, from what we understand, that this is going to be a challenging issue in terms of the House negotiating with the Senate as they look at a potential phase 4 down the road. But we're just in kind of wait and see mode right now. Hopeful that Congress does something, and then if not, we'll look at try to figure out a state solution.
But you're hoping federal first, not a state level solution. I mean that's basically where the focus is, at the federal level.
Yeah, I mean, I think our our opinion is that to have broad regulatory certainty is certainly a good thing. I mean, we have North Dakota businesses that have locations in Minnesota. We have some larger ones that have say some manufacturers that are here in North Dakota that might have another location out of state.
Or maybe you're a Fargo business. You got Minnesota workers. Like you're in Fargo, but somebody from Moorhead works for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we think something broad that provides regulatory certainty, or pardon me, legal certainty, regardless of jurisdiction, would be best. But if not, we're going to certainly look at what we can do here in North Dakota.
Yeah. Well, Arik, anything else? I mean, how is it? I mean, just generally. I mean, obviously this is an important issue, but generally, we saw the government put a lot of loan programs in place, a lot of relief money in place. What are you hearing from the business community? Did that stuff help?
Yeah, I think people were. It depends on what industry you're in. I'll say that the programs certainly are helpful. I know that the recently passed update to the PPP program by Congress is going to help folks in certain situations. I know there's a concern out there that if these some of these are loans that could be converted to a grant, but if they're not, people already are hurting and they're taking out a lot of loans, taking on a lot of new debt. So there's a concern there. But it's been kind of interesting. Every week I have a conference call with my counterparts across the country, and you think, you hear from businesses here that, things aren't happening, things aren't moving. And then I'll visit with my colleagues in other states, and, like using restaurants, for example, when we opened at 50%, well, they weren't open, or they were 25% based on the data in those states. And so it kind of gives you an interesting perspective that, even though we have our challenges here, other places in the country certainly have had more challenges. The unique thing that we have here that they don't, in many cases, is a strong reliance on oil tax revenue, which is the other kicker for the economic side of things here in the state.
Woof. It's going to be an ugly session coming up here next year.
It's going to be interesting. I'll say that.
Yeah. Do you I mean, I know, again, I think North Dakota's leadership's done a great job overall. I mean, you could quibble here and there, but for the most part, I think North Dakota did about as good a job as you could do given the situation. Just my personal feelings, but as things start to reopen, I mean, who's lagging? I mean, who's still hurting out there? I mean, where did this fall the worst?
I have a sense that the hospitality industry, and specifically hotels, are one of the hardest hit.
Yeah.
Even though restaurants are starting to move, come back, there's still not a lot of corporate travel, which hotels really rely on. A lot of large events have had to get canceled, which is another big source of revenue. So I think long term, hotel operators are in one of the toughest spots. And, they're not going to be able to come back really until consumer confidence comes back. And that's a big deal.
Well, Arik, I thank you for your time. Certainly appreciate it. And good luck watching this legislation go forward. I hope it gets put in place quickly, because I think that the sooner we can get this certainty in place, the easier it'll be to start to reopen and get back to normal.
Hey, I appreciate it, Rob, and I agree. And invite me back another time. I'd love to come on.